Hey, folks, and welcome to yet another episode of Tai'Shar Manethrin, a Wheel of Time podcast. I'm Sam.
I'm Will.
We're back again on the Lord of Chaos, and we're diving right on into chapter 13. Will, you want to take it away?
Sure enough, chapter 13 is called Under the Dust. It starts with a Nynaeve perspective. Theodrin is working with Nynaeve to try to break her block. Yes, we are 6 books in, and this is still a thing.
Oh, man, I am so ready to be done with it.
I know.
Definitely. She is too, you can tell.
Right, yeah. I'm more struck in this book than any other so far that Jordan reacquaints his readers with his world and his rules in every book as if it's new every time, which I know
it's like a little strange. Like, okay, if you're picking up Lord of Chaos, I don't care how much explanation you get, you are going to be lost.
Exactly. Yeah. Like here we're reminded of what it means to be burned out and how dangerous it is. I guess
to be fair, like at the time when these were coming out, like there was a pretty big gap and probably people forgot some stuff, I guess.
Right. That was exactly what I was thinking. Like, as a person who is reading this, and when I read it for the first time or listened to it, really, I was just going from one book to another. And so it was kind of a binge of all of them. And so it felt strange to me, but yeah, in defense, it's more of a reminder for readers that have read the rest of the books than I think it is.
This may have been the last one I read like in a row, and then waiting for I want to say the Crown of Swords is the first hardback I bought. I'm pretty sure. So yeah, that rings true for me as well. The first 6 I just kind of binged, and then after that it's like, okay, what happened? What's going on here? I've read a bunch of other stuff in the meantime, and yeah.
And I mean, and maybe that's part of the thing with the slog is that by that time you have so much to catch up on that that's
they just like spend half a book like, here's what happened before. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Kind of reminding you of the rules and everything.
Yeah.
So anyway, Theodrin is trying different shock effects to get Nynaeve to channel without being angry, and nothing seems to work. This section is a little repetitive and boring as she tries.
I feel like I had a almost exactly same chapter or section, and it's like they were just interchangeable,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just kind of goes on for a while. She tries different novice exercises and is thinking about different things, all while trying to maintain calm and serenity and reaching for the source.
I think later at some point someone just has Nynaeve stand on one foot and like talk.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what level of ridiculousness have we reached here? Oh my gosh.
I think it's in this chapter. But after leaving her failed lessons, she sees Ter'angreal, who's Elida's emissary to the rebel Aes Sedai. She just notices her there as they're walking by. So Nynaeve goes back to her room and talks to Elaine. Basically, Elaine's life kind of sucks right now too. Both of them are clearly more powerful and more talented than all the other Aes Sedai there, but because Aes Sedai are Aes Sedai, the fact that they're accepted means that they're treated like children and forced to do whatever they're told.
Even though they've like fought Forsaken, had all these adventures.
Right. Yeah, and are clearly more powerful than any other.
Once they're Aes Sedai, their level of strength will be respected, and they'll be higher in the hierarchy as a result. There's actually later in the book, one of the Aes Sedai gets into this a little bit. It's like, if 2 people are the same level in terms of the power, then it falls back on who's been Aes Sedai longer and who was accepted longer, who is not a novice longer, and like there's different things that they use to decide who is sort of better, should be deferred to or whatever. But when they're accepted, everybody's trash.
Yep, pretty much. So Nynaeve tells Elaine that she eavesdropped on a conversation with the Saladar Six, which, according to the Wikia, is the fan name for the 6 Aes Sedai, who are the core of the Saladar Rebellion. Yeah, Shiriam, Anaya, Morel, Bandon, Morven, Carlinia, and so Nynaeve explains that their message back to Elida is that they need more time to decide. And Nynaeve thinks this is a bad sign that she and Elaine should just run away to Camelin instead of risking being subject to Elida if those sitters decide that they're going to go side with Elida. Elaine doesn't think so, and as they're arguing, Ter'angreal just steps right in and is actually relatively civil and flattering to both of the two girls. She seems to recognize that they're both pretty powerful, and I think realizes also that it would be pretty good if they would come back and join the tower proper. And she asks Elaine to leave so she can speak to Nynaeve alone. Tarna tries to dredge information about Rand from Nynaeve, who doesn't give her any helpful info.
Clearly has an agenda here.
Right. And
as all Aes Sedai do at this point. The same agenda generally.
I will say I appreciate this because we haven't had too many Reds that were capable of just being civil. Like even if she has an agenda, even if she's on the wrong side, that like she doesn't come off as a total jerk in this scene. And she really does seem to have a measure of respect for Nynaeve and Elaine, even if it's, politically kind of motivated. So after realizing she isn't going to get anything, Tarna again kind of threatens a little bit Nynaeve.
Yeah, for sure.
To get her to return to the tower, but then she just up and leaves. It's not like she's actually going to
grab her by the scruff of her neck or something.
Right. Yeah. And so Elaine brings the Twisted Stone ring back to their room, and the two of them enter Ter'angreal. After spinning a page describing dresses, the ladies
what are you doing?
So the ladies try to use need to locate something that would help Rand. They first appear in Tar Valon.
Such a nebulous concept, but as a way to advance the plot, sure.
They go to Tar Valon and then to the White Tower itself, and Elaine sees Egwene for a moment, but she disappears. And then
because that's what we're doing right now. We're keeping them apart.
Right. Yep. And it's the lack of communication thing to keep certain plates in the air. Then they shift to a store of Ter'angreal and Tar Valon. So this is a room full of objects of the power that no one knows what they're for. This is kind of down in the basement is kind of the feeling you get. But they decide that they probably couldn't get to it.
That makes sense.
And so they're like, okay, so other than that,
Ter'angreal, tell us somewhere else we need.
Right. And what's kind of interesting, and I even checked the wiki to make sure, and it actually has this note down in the bottom. At no point do we ever discover what it was that Ter'angreal was trying to point them to
in the tower. Oh, it's like, there's probably tons of stuff that's like really important that no one knows what it is that Elaine could probably figure out, but maybe in the fourth age they get around to it,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I was thinking today it would be really cool to give me give me a short story in the fourth age. Show me what life is like after. Oh, I don't know if that's a spoiler. Yeah, I guess that is. Cut that.
No worries.
Just show me what happens in the fourth age, with the dynamic between the White and Black Tower, if it's still a thing, there's a variety of things that would be really interesting to see. Right. Just give me something. I know we can just do it ourselves in our head, but
yeah. No, I'm with you. I would love to see just a little snippet. Who knows? Maybe if the show is successful, maybe they can
persuade Brandon to just give us a little short story, man.
Right. So after they exclude Tar Valon from their search, they go through a few more shifts and they land in a different storeroom, somewhere else. It's covered in dust, hence the name of the chapter, filled with random objects. And they eventually identify the MacGuffin. A shallow crystal bowl covered in clouds, and thus begins the fandom's third least favorite subplot.
Really? What's the first two?
I'm kind of just editorializing there.
I thought you were being serious. I could see that being true because this one is sort of awful. Such a side plot. Like, come on, man, really?
I mean,
are we doing this? Like.
I think the least favorite has to be the subplot.
That makes sense. That's a major problem with the slog in general. Right. That is a lot of the slog.
And then the plot is probably after that. That's why I say this is like the third. So they find the shallow crystal bowl covered in clouds, and the first true vestiges of the slog, I think, really, put the hooks in here.
This book, man, is when you start to feel it. You're like thinking, Jordan, what are you doing?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, where is this going, bro?
Yeah. Elaine identifies the city they're in as Abu Dar, and they agree to go there as quickly as possible. So, chapter 14, Dreams and Nightmares, Mares. Egwene's perspective confirms that she was in Ter'angreal and jumped away when she saw Elaine and Nynaeve, but for reasons, she felt the need to get away. Egwene,
whatever, man.
Egwene is walking among the constellation of dreams. This is, cool image. We've seen it already.
Oh, man. Is this that chapter? Oh, yeah.
Yep.
This is that chapter.
Okay. So we're reminded that
this is like the igloo chapter a little bit.
Yeah, a little
bit more cringy if possible.
Yes.
I think it's Kate Redding's voice that she uses for Gawain. Oh, man.
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, dear. I mean, the dialogue doesn't need any help in being just real cringy, but that really is the cherry on top.
Yeah. So we're reminded that she's not supposed to be in Ter'angreal right now at all.
She's been forbidden because she's getting headaches or whatever. I don't know.
Right. And Egwene's greatest want is to learn. So she had to continue to learn without being found out. So she can be there. She identifies several people's dreams before she's sucked into Gawain's dream.
Oh, yeah.
And in Gawain's dream, she is imprisoned. And
by Rand.
Yes. And Gawain, or a less attractive version of Gawain.
Right. And like a more monstrous version of Rand.
Yes. Is he's rescuing her. And after he succeeds, he professes his love and
takes her to a meadow or something.
Right. Yeah.
Like a picnic or I don't know.
I picture the scene in episode 2, Attack of the Clones.
I was just thinking of the prequels.
Yeah, and yes, exactly.
The dialogue in this.
The dialogue,
yes. Exactly right. That is just ringing so true right now.
And I mean, right. And I mean, this is one of those scenes where it's like, aside from Fael and Perrin, really, Gawain and Egwene probably have one of the more developed kind of love stories, at least in this book.
Yeah.
And that where they actually kind of show them falling in love, so to speak.
Sure.
But when you read this chapter and people complain about, well, Robert Jordan doesn't do romance much, and he's just kind of like, they're in love. After this, I'm like, I kind of prefer the just they're in love.
He should not do it. Yeah. He should not have done it at all.
This is
the fact that it was in Gawain's dream. So it's like, okay, we can't blame Gawain that much. This is in his dream. But the fact that we're having to read it.
Yes, you're right. And like you say, Kate Redding's voice when she's doing, the Gawain voice, is this really cheesy? I love you. I love you. I love you kind of voice.
Michael Kramer for Gawain uses like a posh British kind of sounding voice, which is sort of jarring, but I prefer it for sure.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Dang.
Yeah, she kind of succumbs to the dream and starts playing into it. To go along with what I said earlier about this being like the first vestiges of the slog in this book, you see the pacing really start to slow down in these chapters.
Yeah.
When I'm writing my notes, normally I have to keep the reading pace normal on the audiobook while I'm like taking notes and listening. But when writing notes on this chapter, I straight up swapped to double speed and...
You didn't miss anything, I'm sure.
I
was like, oh my God, is this still going on?
Right. I still had plenty of time to get all my notes down, including like while I was writing, like what I'm reading right now as a note, I was in the middle of, them professing their love for each other just over and over again.
It's still going. It won't stop.
Yes. So we get this scene of Gawain and Egwene being romantic. So.
And then he like resets it and like does it again, goes through it and like changes the way he talks.
Right. Yeah.
It's in his dream and Egwene sucked into his dream.
Right. When I first got to this, I was like, can I just skip this? And I'm like, well, no, because as we talked about, Jordan,
it's kind of fun to talk about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of hilarious because, Jordan tends to skip over romance a lot.
Yeah. And here's why.
This is really the scene where Egwene fully realizes that, yes, she is in love with Gawain.
Not Galad. Yeah, okay.
Right. Yeah. Which is important because the two of them are going to be in love now. And per usual, it's not going to be all that logical because, the two of them
it just seems like, in a lot of cases, it just seems a sort of preordained plot point that just needs to be checked off. Like, yeah, we need to go. Egwene needs to have a lover, needs to have a romantic interest.
Right.
So Gawain. But yeah. So this was Robert Jordan's ham-fisted attempt at building that foundation. I'm sorry, there's just no two ways to put it. This is awful. I love these books. I love Robert Jordan. This is objectively awful.
Yeah, it's funny how he can have this beautiful poetic prose when he's describing the most random things in a scene or a dress even, and then you get to this and it's like, it just feels unnatural. It
just feels tilted and awkward.
Right.
Forced. Yeah, very much so.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's like he knows that it helps that it was in a dream in this case.
Right.
But not that much. He still wrote these words. Like Kate Redding still had to read them.
Right. Exactly. So we are saved by a swap to Nynaeve's perspective. She's staying awake in accordance with Theodrin's orders, wondering if exhaustion might finally.
Why not? Let's just keep throwing darts at the dartboard until we find something.
Then a bubble of evil starts to make random inanimate objects just fly around, hitting people.
Bubble of evil. We haven't seen him in a while. The bubble of evil.
Yeah.
He's been taking a break.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's funny, the bubble of evil becomes more common. Like it kind of swaps places with the random Trolloc attack of the first.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Right. Toward the end of the series. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You get more and more just like, hey, things have been kind of boring. Bubble of evil. And,
right.
Let's get creative with it. And you really think this would be horrifying.
Yeah. To have your blanket come up and try to strangle you or suffocate you. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, things just started like nonstop trying to beat you to death.
Yeah.
I hope they play this out as really unsettling if something just started to shake suddenly and then relentlessly started to try to hack at you.
Oh, yeah.
People are getting stabbed, killed. And so she and Nynaeve and Elaine rush out, and Anaya has them link with her, and they walk around battling off various objects and rescuing the people they find. Out of nowhere, Nicola suddenly has a foretelling about the last battle. If it wasn't in the midst of this kind of moment, it would be almost humorous because of how just out of nowhere it happens. But Nicholas says, the lion's sword, the dedicated spear, she who sees beyond, 3 on the boat, and he who is dead yet lives, the great battle done, but the world not done with battle, the land divided by the return, and the guardians balance the servants, the future teeters on an edge of a knife blade.
Was this a little free verse there, Nick? I mean, like, just we're in the middle of a battle here, honey. What are you doing?
Right. Just like, hey, drop a beat for me. I'm about to foretell. The lion's sword, the dedicated spear, she who sees beyond, that 3 on a boat. And
it's like having a seizure out of nowhere.
Right. Anaya doesn't seem to think it's anything important, which is just so bizarre.
Ignores her.
Like,
speak up, girl.
It's like everybody freezes as she just spits out this, bizarre stream of things, and then it's like,
well, that was weird.
Okay, yeah.
Moving on.
They continue to rescue people from flying objects.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well,
that was a thing that happened. Like.
And eventually things do settle down and they start, healing folks from all of that. So we move on to chapter 15, A Pile of Sand. Egwene is awake and chastising herself for getting sucked into Gawain's dream.
We are also chastising her for getting sucked.
Right. She's still tired and recovering from her injuries sustained during the battle with Lanfear. So she falls back into real sleep and has a series of spoiler dreams. several of these involve Gawain, and several of Perrin with the Hawk and the Falcon trying to throw his axe away.
I'll be honest, whenever these things, I just skip right over them.
Right.
Not gonna lie, like it's like, okay, whatever, man.
Yeah, Matt speaking the old tongue with ravens on his shoulder. A woman beckoned Matt towards danger, and that is, interesting. We're gonna see that woman in a book, I think, or so, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Elaine forcing Rand to his knees. Elaine, Min, and Avienda in a circle around Rand. That's coming up soon. Then each laying a hand on him. And finally, Rand walking to a burning mountain with the seals to the Dark One's prisons crunching underneath his feet.
Great.
So, yeah. She's
Sunshine
awakened.
And rainbows. Yeah.
Yes, fun times. Right after her, I guess it's just the opposite of her dream with Gawain.
Yeah.
She's awakened and she speaks to the wise ones, who are not convinced that she's ready to return to the dream yet. And
do they ever do jumping jacks at various times?
Yeah.
Squat thrusts or whatever.
Burpees. She still needs time to recover. Apparently, the Saladar Aes Sedai, who the Wise Ones have been meeting in Ter'angreal, are demanding to see Egwene, but they won't let her return until they know she is well. Egwene is, of course, very concerned about this, since she's been
pretending to be Aes Sedai. Yeah.
Right.
It's like strange to me that this hasn't occurred to her earlier. She's like, "Oh crud, I've got to meet with him, and everybody's gonna find out that I've been saying this." Like, why did you didn't think through this, honey?
Exactly. So after that, we swap back over to Elaine's perspective. She and Nynaeve haven't slept at all, and they're joined by Siuan, and they gather near the little tower as Tarna Fair leaves. Ramonda announces to everyone gathered that nothing has changed. They will not be returning to the White Tower. Nynaeve and Elaine go to speak with Shiriam.
Thanks, Ro. Why'd you even have to announce that? Right. Announce that nothing is there to announce.
Right. Yes. I feel like, though, that relates a lot to like the kind of announcements that we're dealing with now in real life.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well said. What we know is that there's nothing we know yet. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. We know that.
I know my governor popped out of her hole just to announce that she hadn't seen her shadow. So a few more weeks of quarantine.
Touche.
Yeah, so Nynaeve and Elaine go to speak with Shiriam, Morven, and Carlinia. In speaking with the women, they explain about finding the Bol Ter'angreal. At first, the women just say, they'll send a letter to an Aes Sedai and
pretty much.
Ebadar. Yeah.
Like, we don't believe you, and who cares?
Right.
You're accepted. Stop talking.
Her name is Merlilla, I believe, is how it's.
I really want to know how Robert Jordan came up with these names. I feel like he had a dartboard with like M, and then like another syllable lined up. He had to have some major spreadsheets going on or something, man.
Yeah, I don't know.
There's a lot of similar names, but I don't think anyone has the same two names, which is quite an accomplishment.
It is amazing, yeah. So Elaine indicates that she thinks the Bol needs a Manda channel to work as well, which is a straight up lie.
Indeed, she has no idea and doesn't think it's true anyway.
Yeah. She also mentions that she's better suited to finding a Ter'angreal, which is true.
That is true,
because she's talented with them. And the two of them should go, since they know where it is, that she and Nynaeve should go. After the Aes Sedai say that they won't send them, Nynaeve blows up.
She's like, but I really want to.
Gives them an angry lecture about them doing nothing because they're afraid and don't know what to do.
You know nothing, Shiriam Sedai.
Yeah, nice. Elaine actually reasons that Nynaeve is saying must be true because the women are not really saying, no, you're wrong. They're kind of like sitting there like with, just kind of masked,
faced.
They, after Nynaeve finishes, they're both sent off to work in the kitchen as punishment. And this is a little odd moment because we shift for like a single paragraph to a Shiriam perspective. If you'd ask me if there are any Shiriam perspectives.
That's crazy to me.
Right, yeah.
And it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and in the whole series, I would not have guessed that there were any, but basically they just admit to each other, Nynaeve is right, and they're scared and they don't know what to do. And that's how we wrap up that chapter. So on into chapter 16, Tellings of the Wheel. So Rand is chilling in the palace, thinking about telling the maidens what Alana did. That is, bonding him.
Oh man, that would be a disaster.
Yeah,
don't do that, man.
Yeah, he decides he doesn't want them to kill her. So he's listening to Nori, the royal clerk, drone on as he's waiting on a group of Andorran nobility. Dylan, Anila, Alurian, Pravarin. I guess
you could absolutely have made up all of those names, and I would be like, sure, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I should have thrown in like a random other,
Pokemon or something. I don't know.
Yeah, right. And Charmander. I'll walk in, and we get some really exciting discussion. This is the first time that Rand formally uses the Lord of the Morning title as his own, but it's spoken by Bashir. Bashir introduces him, but it was all arranged by Rand. The nobles notice the wine that is served is chilled, which one of them says is unusual considering the lack of a true winter this year, and must have been difficult to find ice. And Rand casually, he says, "You think I would have wasted ice?" Rand, implies they realize that he used
channeled,
and then they're kind of like all shaken by that.
Like, ew, dark one taint.
Right. Basically, the thrust of the meeting is that the Andorrans are not interested in bowing to Rand's wishes, and they disagree on who should take the Lion Throne. They also aren't sure what to believe regarding who Rand is, and that's when Dylan, and she's really the only important one of the group, asks Rand who his mother is. He answers truthfully, Shail, Maiden of the Spear. She says, well, that's just odd because
you look like somebody else.
You look similar to a woman who disappeared 24 years ago. And
right, they've like all been staring at him this whole time. He's like, what is it?
Yeah. As such, she inadvertently reveals that Rand is related to, is the son of Tigraine.
Yeah.
Yes, the former daughter heir before Morghese. And
so what is Rand's first thought is, oh my lord, is Elaine my cousin? Right. He is really, really concerned about this.
Yeah.
Have I been kissing my cousin?
Right. So
this occupies a lot of time.
Yeah, it is. And what's funny is like, it's one of the more truthful moments. I mean,
yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough.
Because he, when it happens, his mind is totally like, okay, wait, so that means, what does that mean? What does this mean? Does this mean? And what does that?
That reminds me. In our youth group in high school, I remember there was a girl named Whitney. And I didn't know her. I was like, I thought she was cute. And then I went to visit my great uncle in the hospital, and she was there. And I found out she was my second cousin.
And I remember when you told me this, and you were like really bummed out about it. And I was like, dude, you never had a chance.
No, I didn't. Absolutely.
Even
agreed.
if
100% agreed on that.
I feel confident that Whitney is not listening to this right now.
I also agree with that.
So here we get a ton of info about Rand's family tree as all of this starts to finally come together,
which is kind of an interesting kind of the result is kind of interesting there.
Right. This is really the connective tissue between what Rand discovered in the Waste in Book 3 about his background and what Morghese just kind of mused out of nowhere for a moment in Book 4. And when she's thinking about, like the history, Tigraine, and all this stuff that led to her becoming queen. You might remember me telling you that when we got to Tigraine's name, I repeated it several times. Because I said, remember, she's going to be important later.
Indeed. And I, at that point, had 100% forgotten all of that stuff. So this is good. Good stuff.
Yeah. Well, that was exactly why I pointed it out. Right. That was exactly why I pointed it out, because like the first time through, you could so easily miss it.
And the second time if it's 15 years after the first time.
Right. Yeah. So Tigraine's first husband was Ter'angreal, Elaine's father, who Rand is not related to at all.
But that is a confusing set of circumstances anyway.
And Tigraine left behind a son, Galad, who manages to somehow be both half brother to Rand and Elaine.
And Elaine, yep. But yet Elaine and Rand are not related directly.
Yeah. Rand just kind of thinks about how it was Tigraine's disappearance that precipitated the events that led to Laemon's sin. cutting down the tree, and all the political unrest in Cairhien that led to Laman cutting down the tree, and which led to the Aiel War, which brought a certain maiden named Shael to Dragonmount
to give birth and die.
Exactly. And we also found out, and this was interesting, something I totally did not grasp, reading through this the first time, but that it was Jatara Moroso, the Aes Sedai who fell dead after announcing the rebirth of the dragon, who was good friends with Tigraine. They were like besties. And she was actually the one who advised her to escape to the Waste. And
perhaps another foretelling.
Yes. So also there's a blink and you'll miss it reference to Lord Luke, who
we have encountered and not really didn't know was. The only reason I knew was I looked at the freaking wiki, because it is not clear.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the only place I think that it becomes it's any clearer, but like it really is. It's one mention.
Yeah, like, and if you've like read the wiki and you understand that, it's like, oh, okay, that's where he talks about it. But still, come on, man.
Right, exactly. He made clear here. Luke was Tigraine's brother, and therefore Rand and Galad's uncle. He disappeared into the Blight around the same time that Tigraine disappeared into the Waste. So that kind of gives us a little bit more information about Lord Luke's story. Dylan emphasizes how different Andor would have been if Tigraine hadn't left. Rand decides it doesn't matter, which really he doesn't. I mean, he says that to himself. He tries to none of this matters.
No.
Yeah, none of this doesn't change anything. So after Dylan leaves, a messenger comes from Samael.
Like you do.
It's a pretty creepy description here. The guy has a big smile, but his eyes look terrified the whole time, is what it says. And at first, he speaks with his own voice, but then in the middle, it changes to being Samael's voice while he's speaking to Rand. And he invites Rand to a truce where he says, "Hey,
I won't kill you. You don't kill me. Let's kill everybody else. And
exactly.
Then everyone else is dead. We can kill each other."
Right. And so Rand, of course, says no.
Like why even send this? What did you think was going to happen, man?
Yeah. So then the man just starts hemorrhaging blood and collapses.
Poor dude.
Yeah. Bashir suggests that the man not returning will be Samael's answer. So Avienda shows up as Rand is deciding to travel to Cairhien and says she wants to go with him to speak with the wise ones, and Rand somewhat reluctantly agrees.
And he's been really trying hard to avoid her for the whole book.
Right. So then we're into chapter 17, The Wheel of a Life. And these chapters, there's a lot of random loose there and crazy talk. I mean, in several of these chapters, anytime
reaching for the source, anytime he sees Taim, he's kill him.
And pretty much anytime Rand is a perspective, we're getting at least a few little thoughts in here and there.
And then Rand saying, shut up, you're not alive, I'm alive, you're dead.
Right. It's mostly just nonsense, but just as we're summarizing, I feel it's necessary to bring up that that's becoming a more and more common thing.
It is, yeah, that's true.
So Rand opens a gateway to Cairhien, and Avienda heads off to see the wise ones. Rand goes to see Berelain and Ruark, who are kind of in a governor military advisor relationship overseeing Cairhien. And here we have a funny moment where Rand realizes that Lews Therin is humming to himself when he sees Berelain
is wearing a low-cut dress, and she does.
And to which Rand actually says, "Stop that!"
Right.
And quit looking through my eyes, I think he says.
Right.
It's kind of a funny moment. I do hope that they're able to find a way to depict these kinds of things.
Definitely.
As he's walking with Ruark and Berelain, he sees a group of Cairhienan women practicing with swords. And Berelain explains that some of the young Cairhienan nobles have adopted their own version of Je'ito, mimicking the ways of the Aiel, which Ruark is very upset and sees it all as a mockery and demands that Rand just order them to stop. So Berelain says that it's actually been good, as it's reduced the number of deaths by duels since this version of Je'ito has substituted, for people killing each other. And so Rand agrees with Berelain, mainly because he put her in charge, and he's trying to be a good leader and honor his delegation. He gets updates on the location of varying armies, Samael's movements, and the Shido's plans. There's also a little mention of fighting in Shara, the land beyond the waste. Ruark is concerned about this because he says there is never fighting in Shara. Really, the Aiel are probably the only people
have contact with them.
Yeah, with them. So he would know. Rand considers that his influence might actually be reaching lands he's never even heard of.
Yeah.
But then he quickly dismisses it and just says he needs to focus right now on Samael. Berylane proves that she's a pretty good ruler.
And which makes sense. You know, she's got a forceful personality and has experience with ruling her own place. And yeah.
Right. As we go further into the books, I think more and more she demonstrates that
she's competent.
Right. Yeah. It's the same kind of cunning that, makes her so much of the huntress when it comes to men. Right. She, that makes her a pretty good.
That's MEN for
yeah.
Yeah. It'd be a very different book.
Right. Yes. But anyway, that she's politically savvy. She's opened the school that Rand asked for and mentions that they've invented some things, though they don't seem to have too much to show for it yet. And in the middle of this, an Aielman interrupts them to tell Rand that he has tow to him because he killed a tree killer.
Oh man, yeah, this is like a really kind of an unpleasant scene. And this was like a guy that helped him take the Stone of Tyr, like one of the first Aiel that he encountered, and like he likes him. He thinks he's
he supported him. He killed him because he was wearing a dragon tattoo a few days ago. Rand's upset about the fact that he has to hang him for it. Mangan, the Aielman, agrees to show up for his hanging with no objections.
Yeah, he's just like, it's an interesting conundrum. Like, I was right to kill him, but I have tow to you, and I will be there, kind of.
Yeah, sure. He's just
strange.
Like, yeah, and so Rand is angry at Berylane and Ruark for not having dealt with this already, and tells them to make sure that if anyone else steps out like this, that they're dealt with properly when it happens, not 6 days later the next time he shows up. Right. And of course he's very upset about having to hang a man who supported him.
Yeah, and he's doing the thing where he's trying to be hard, but he really does feel bad about it. But he's trying to be hard and.
Trying to be consistent too with what he's
right. It's like unfortunately the right thing to do in his situation, but yeah, he doesn't. That's
right to maintain order because it shows to the Kyrianans and Tyrant people in the area that hey, if he's not going to play favorites with the Aiel who are his people, then he's not going to play favorites with anybody. So then we move on to chapter 18, which is the last one we're doing for this episode. Rand pronounces that Mangan's hanging will be tomorrow, and he's going to head to the school and he goes to the school alone. He goes to the school alone, and he considers how he'll never be completely alone between Lews Therin and now Alana.
Yeah,
in his head.
His head's getting positively crowded.
Right. And, he thinks about that and just how strange that is. He gets to the school and we get our first tiny little bitty taste of steampunk thrown into our high fantasy. And I am here for it.
I'm all about it. We need more of that for sure.
Right. I'd actually be for having more than we get, like show up in the show. But, I hope that they lean into this as the series goes along. It's just fun to me. I always love...
The guy's like building a Model T kind of thing.
Right, exactly. I just love the steampunk aesthetic. And I feel like it's a lot of times it's done poorly, or at least the aesthetic is done well, but then like the story is done poorly.
Right. Everyone, they tend to focus too much on the world building side.
Exactly.
It's easy to do that when you have such a rich architecture to pull from.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, I don't mean to overstate it here, but they do have a few inventions, a new device for making paper and improved printing press, new models for viaducts and sewers, a new kind of plow that ran greenlight for like mass production, and some other things that don't have clear purposes. He finally comes to a man who is working on some kind of steam engine based on the description, but he doesn't seem to quite have it working yet.
Yeah, so, talking about like the genre and like the general milieu of the books and the show, it's like it certainly is high fantasy, no doubt. But I've always appreciated how it's almost post-apocalyptic high fantasy.
Right.
That's always fun. The Age of Legends, and then this apocalyptic moment of the breaking of the world happened and all this stuff was lost, and some of it comes back. Like Samael talks about shock lances and has electricity, sort of, kind of, maybe, and we get these flashbacks to the Age of Legends, and it's always, and yet we are in very much a more of a medieval setting. It's like after the breaking, and so I've always enjoyed that about it.
Right. In a lot of ways, it's a combination of a lot of different things, because you look at the images of the Age of Legends as it's described, and it's like sci-fi almost.
Yeah, it's like sci-fi powered by magic.
Right. Exactly.
Which is cool. Which I'm glad is not like the main setting of the show, but as a backdrop, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And it's a way for it to set itself apart from stuff like Game of Thrones, because the Game of Thrones, there's allusions to that, maybe with Volantis, whatever it's called, but it's never explored at all in terms of the show or the books. But this is just a key difference between Wheel of Time and Game of Thrones, a way in which it can differentiate itself by just showing the breaking, showing the Age of Legends, showing some of the tech coming back.
Right.
That sort of thing.
Exactly. So Rand speaks with a historian named Herod Fell, who's a guy I'd completely forgotten about, or I probably didn't even notice him much when I first read through.
But he's important.
Especially, yeah, and especially the way that I love the way that Michael Kramer reads him. I like this character. He doesn't seem to be all there, despite clearly possessing
absent-minded professor kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. So Rand speaks with him briefly and tries to get some information about the last battle, or find some way to escape his bond with Alana. He doesn't really get anything out of the interaction in the end. This part's kind of interesting, but it's more of a reflection on the futility of trying to understand history and the nature of existence. This ends with Rand asking, is there any reason to intentionally break the seals on the Dark One's prison? And Herod Fell is shocked.
He's like, no.
Well, he says only a madman would break the seals. Why would you want to even know that? And Rand just says, oh, I don't know. And right then it says Lews Therin is chanting, break the seals, break the seals, break the seals, and end it.
I don't know. Maybe I have a madman in my head. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hypothetically speaking.
Again, I love this idea so much that I'm just preparing for them to not at all do it. But I love the idea of Lews Therin being personified in
standing there off to the side.
Right. Yeah. And he's like, why would you want to know that? And them going, break the seals, break the seals, break the seals.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that'd be great. I hope so. I really hope they do that right.
I know this is supposed to be kind of dark, but I can't help but see it as funny.
It's true.
So anyway, and Rand is trying to be like all casual about it. So is there any reason they would do this? Break the seals, break the seals, break the seals.
I'm all about it, man.
Then great. We swap to an Egwene perspective. She's walking around Cairhien and talking about how everyone thinks she's an Aiel wise one because she's dressed like one.
Dressed like one, yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly has the tan at this point.
Right. Yeah. And it's made it difficult for her to actually get directions anywhere because no one likes to talk to the Aiel.
Yeah.
And Egwene is upset because Aviendha had been summoned to a meeting with the Wise Ones that she was not allowed to attend. Egwene enters the tents to speak with Rand to find out that he's left to visit the school. And she starts thinking of the dream that she had about Gawain, and she blushes
slightly. Yep.
Yeah. and then Sorilea correctly surmises that she's thinking of
about a man. Yep.
Right. And she goes on, so, it would be good for Egwene to marry.
I've got a guy in mind, in fact.
Yeah. She's got a particular Aiel.
Come see him in the sweat tents.
Right, exactly. Eventually, Rand shows back up, and Egwene asks for help getting the Wise Ones to allow her to go back into the world's dreams again. And he asks her where Elaine is, and she won't tell, so he won't help her.
Right. He's like, well, fine.
Quid pro no quo. No quid no quo. Anyway, we swap back to Rand's perspective. He considers how much Egwene is behaving more and more like an Aes Sedai, and he
doesn't like it one bit.
Yeah, and he has to be keep in mind that she is. He just thinks about how tired he is. And then we swap to Suilin, who is upset that Rand has limited his guard to 2 Aiel. That's really all that happens here. I don't really understand the point of this.
Either. Yeah, that's strange. A strange choice.
But we don't really learn anything. But maybe I'll be reminded of some reason.
It's sort of the danger of third person limited is you can be third person for anybody unless you really, set yourself some rules. And it's like, all right, and maybe we're not giving Jordan enough credit here. Maybe there is a point to that scene, just like, right. But it just seems unlikely. I don't know.
Yeah, it was just kind of odd. And I mean, again, if any of our listeners know the moment we're talking about and are like, they did that because of this,
tell us. We want to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if it's like 3 books away or something.
Right. Fine. Yeah.
Pitch it to us. We'll listen.
We would love to know. Or make it up. Actually, I would love for you to make it up. Just make up a reason.
Zulin wanted to jump over a rainbow and whatever.
Right. Yeah, I had to ride a unicorn to get to the moon. So that gets us to the end of chapter 18 and this episode. But before we get into spoilers, we are about to talk about spoilers. So if you don't want to hear spoilers, join us next week. We're only going to talk about them for a few minutes. You're not going to miss much. So, so as I mentioned earlier, we don't know what the object is that brought them to the tower when they were asking Ter'angreal for something that would help Rand. I wondered if it was that really powerful rod that Egwene later uses during the Shan-Chan assault on the White Tower. That's a known object, so it doesn't seem likely.
Who can know what Ter'angreal wants them to know? Good question, though. It's probably a lot of different stuff in there, I would expect.
I'd like to believe that it was an object that would make everyone magically communicate with each other clearly and succinctly, since that would really have saved everyone the most trouble.
The plot Ter'angreal, the plot salvation Ter'angreal. It would prevent the slog.
So
I'm here for that.
This was more intriguing because I don't remember at all Shara being mentioned, this clearly and this early. So the mention of fighting in Shara might possibly be an argument that Jordan actually was planning on Demandred's eventual role being the warlord bringing the surprise army from Shara. That's that I know that's a little bit of a stretch, but I want to give throw that out there as a possibility since we were in an earlier episode.
Demandred was we don't know where he is, and he's clearly involved in somewhere, and so it makes sense that he's not like he's just some minor lord.
Right. And I mean, and he does show up later with an army from Shara. So it kind of makes sense that since, we met him, he kind of disappears for the rest of this book. Yeah. Then, maybe that was what he went off to do. So anyway, that's all I had. So
very good. No, that's definitely something that's bugged me is like, okay, we get all the Demandred perspectives in this book, and then he's like just gone. Like, what was the point of that? So, yeah, it would have been nice to have gotten something confirming that or at least a little bit more. But I think it makes as much sense as anything else. So visit our website at tsmpodcast.com if you so desire. Fill out our contact form and please let us know how we're doing. We would like to know. If you make a correction, we'll make that correction in a future episode if you're not a jerk about it. If you have nice things to say, we'll give you a shout out. Please follow us on all the social media, podcast TSM, and say, hey, we would love to hear from you. Rate us wherever you get your podcasts, and share with your friends who are getting into the series because, as we know, I have at least 2 friends who have started the series in the past year in preparation for the show. So if you got friends like that, please let them know about our podcast. We'd love for them to check us out. And so, as always, Tai'Shar Manethrin.